Hello, everybody, and we are live. Welcome back. I'm very excited to be joined today by Ben Golub. He's the CEO of Storj Labs, and we are going to talk about decentralized storage, how to build decentralized applications, and why working with Web3 might just be a better way of working with technology for somebody, anybody, everybody out there. Ben, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you for having me on the show.
That's my absolute pleasure. I'm humbled that you're here with us. For those people who don't know you, if you could just give your brief introduction. You've had an interesting journey to Web3, so if you could let the people know who you are, the work that you do, and then we'll get into more details on the show.
Great. I'm Ben Golub. I have spent most of my life in startups, so this is now my 8th startup, 4th as CEO. I started out with Web 1.0, Web 2, and of course now Web 3. And immediately prior to coming to Storj, I was CEO of Docker, which, for those who aren't familiar, basically sort of kicked off the containerization revolution. But if you will, sort of enabling you to sort of build, ship, and run almost any program anywhere, right? It allows you to decompose it into multiple interlocking things. And of course, that was sort of largely on sort of runtime, if you will, right? This is more sort of storage. Storage is more storage, but it's the same general trend. Right? As I said to you earlier, I'm trying to recursively justify my life. But basically, I think it's all about pushing things to the end, sort of, separating hardware from, the things people really want to do.
Amazing and very, very impressive. Docker, I think most people who work in technology have either used Docker, heard of Docker, or love Docker and are constantly trying to get Docker into their lives more. Continuous integration, continuous development is a huge part of making applications and systems better and easier to run. And that you have chosen to move from a place like that is enabled, let's call it the Web 2 side or the traditional side of applications, to run better, more composable, easier, more modular. To then come to storage and start plying your trade in Web3, I think is a really interesting move and a very important one that we have people with your level of experience stepping into this particular technology sphere. I think it's huge.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it is such an important development for the world, right? And I think actually even back in the Docker days, right, there were certain problems that we knew about data, right? Data tends to have gravity and it doesn't tend to move, and it's also just growing exponentially, right? I mean, the fun cocktail party stat you can use is that the world last year created enough data that if you tried to store it on CD-ROMs, remember those, millimeter thick. If you tried to take the amount of data the world created last year and store it on CD-ROMs, you'd get a stack of CD-ROMs that go to the orbit of Mars and most of the way back. And it's growing 23% a year, right? So finding a way to securely, intelligently, cost-effectively, environmentally, responsibly store that data and make it available is a huge problem. And I think decentralization is really the only answer. So.
Incredible. Well, we're going to get into that in more detail. Before we get started on the questions, this is a live Q&A. That is going to be Q&A at the end of this show. So if you've got any questions for Ben, if there's anything you'd like to know about storage, decentralized storage, building decentralized applications, maybe even anything about Docker from back in the day, please do put your questions in the chat and I'll do my best to get to them. Also, give us your GMs. Let us know where you're coming in from around the world. It's always exciting to see where the community is coming in from. So let us know in the comment section where you are, what you're up to, what you're building, and let's get into it. Ben, let's get started on the importance of decentralized storage. So you started mentioning that obviously we're not going to try and store all of the world's data with a CD-ROM. We're probably not going to try and store it on a pen drive either. The amount of data we are creating is growing exponentially, whether that be the kind of online transactions between individuals and companies, business to business, business to government, whether that's now device-generated transactions, machine-generated transactions, AI-generated transactions, right? We're only going to see more ways that data is going to be flowing between parties. And because of some of the challenges of the way that either from regulatory reasons or from architectural reasons, we manage data, it all gets stored somewhere. Or for the most part, it is cached, stored, required to be maintained. And we've seen proliferation of regulation around that as well.
Absolutely.
Talk to us about what inspired you to come into the sphere of decentralized storage and why you find it's important.
Sure, absolutely, right. So, it starts with what we've just been talking about, right? The amount of data is exploding, and the importance of the data is exploding too, right? So clearly a lot of that 143 zettabytes is cat videos or other stuff that perhaps the world doesn't care about. But there's also the cure for cancer is in there, right? And clean energy is in there, right? And the answer to a lot of the world's problems is in there, right? And so we want to be able to make sure that the data can be stored. But there are also a few other things that are happening, right? Increasingly, that data is not created in a data center. That data is created at the edge, right? It's created on devices. It gets gathered from the edge. It's consumed at the edge. We're consuming this. Everybody who's consuming this show is consuming it at the edge, right? Meanwhile, we have sort of this weird thing where data is growing about 23% a year, and the predominant model for data storage these days, which is with an Amazon or a Microsoft or a Google, the price of that has not come down materially in about 7 years. So there's a huge mismatch there already. There's a huge mismatch in data wanting to be at the edge and it being stored in the center, right? There's a huge mismatch in terms of privacy issues. There's also a huge mismatch in terms of environmental issues. And if the way we store data doesn't change, it could be as high as 14% of world carbon in the next 10 years, which would make it a bigger contributor than agriculture, right? So the sort of thing where I think we need to solve things. Meanwhile, dirty secret, most of the drives in the world are about 20% full. And we know that if we could somehow fill them up, you could do so for no additional cost, almost no additional electricity, almost no additional carbon, be much lower cost, but also be faster and be more secure and be closer to the edge. So all the things that people want from a sort of a computer science perspective, as well as an economic perspective, as well as a societal perspective. And so all we had to do at Storj when I started 5 years ago was figure out how could you actually do that, harvest and sort of create the Airbnb of storage, if you will. And that's what we've been working on.
Got it. So you've got a democratization story, you've got an efficiency story, you've got a scalability problem with the current architectural model, and a whole bunch of things besides. Right. So for those who haven't come across storage and various other, I guess, variations on decentralized storage models, it's not the only one out there, but we are here to talk about storage today. There are some material differences also in data models and how data is stored.
Sure.
Talk us through how you guys do it, because I'm fascinated to know more and to help people level up on how this actually works. Sure.
So let me just start with maybe an analogy, right? So as you and I are talking, right? What we are saying is being broken up into packets, and those packets are going around the world across routers and bridges, and you don't care who's running them. I don't care who's running them, right? As long as they're getting compensated, they don't care what's going across them, right? And yet that has proven to be massively scalable, massively better than, if you're old enough, remembering what it was like when you had to wait until Sunday evening to make a long distance phone call because otherwise British Telecom or AT&T or whoever, right, was charging a lot, right? So what we do is that we enable almost any drive in any data center or even basement, right, to take its spare capacity and rent it out to us. So again, it's sort of like Airbnb, except instead of renting out your room in your house, you're renting out spare rooms in spare capacity on your disk drive. And then what we do is that any file that's going to come to our network is first encrypted. So it's scrambled with keys that we don't have, that nobody running disk drives has. It's only the end user has, right? Then we chop it up into little pieces, and we chop it up in a special way so that, for every chunk, we create 80 pieces, of which any 29 can be used to put it back together. So I'll say it again, 80 pieces of which any 29 can put it back together. And then each of those 80 pieces goes and sits on a different drive run by a different person, different network, different part of the world, different power supply, you name it. And doing things that way and ends up doing a lot of the great things that we talked about, right? So that, if you're running a drive, you just have extra space and you just get extra little encrypted blobs, so you don't care about it, right? It can't do any harm to you, right? It's not like a bad guest if you're running renting out an Airbnb, right? Similarly, we only need 29 out of those 80 pieces. So if normally if you store data on one drive and your cat spills over your drink, you've lost the file, right? Or if there's a fire or a flood or whatever, we've created something so that we could lose all of Western Europe due to a power outage, right? Or all of the West Coast of the US, right? Or even, all of Eastern Europe, and we wouldn't lose data, right? So we're at the point right now where we've never lost a file, and the only thing that would cause us to lose a file would be something like an asteroid, in which case we're probably not the biggest.
At that point, we've got higher order issues to deal with.
We have higher order issues to deal with, right? But also that same thing means that we're faster, right? So if you're viewing a video that's being streamed off of us, it's coming to you from the 29 fastest drives, right? So if I'm in Burbank, it's going to come from different places than if I'm in Birmingham or Brisbane or Bangalore, right? It's all going to come from different places, right? So we end up being globally faster. And then because we are using spare capacity, it's much cheaper, right? It's profitable for people who are renting it out, and we can be much lower cost as well.
Got it. So you've got some of the traditional kind of principles of redundancy, or kind of preventing redundancy, of accessibility, of kind of switching between locations to improve performance,
right?
As you
Absolutely.
would see with traditional cloud.
Absolutely right. Except in the traditional cloud, right? They tend to create copies, right? So you have a copy in the US, and a copy in the UK, and a copy in Australia, and a copy in Sao Paulo. And in our case, we basically take the same file, break it up into lots of pieces, and spread it globally, which means it's fast globally as well, and a lot fewer copies.
And the good news is that as a result, then we can protect your cat videos from everything barring Armageddon. And
barring Armageddon, yes, and we also can keep them much more private, right? Because all that is ever sitting on any drive that somebody might compromise is an encrypted 1/29th of what you'd need to actually find it, right?
Indeed. And so you've got some
diversity is better, right? Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm going to put up the comment from Juliet here who said, no disparaging of cat videos. Cat videos equals joy. So
absolutely.
Clearly,
I love cat videos. Actually, I'm a dog person, but I love pet videos.
I was about to ask, because we've had at least 3 cat references now and several Airbnb analogies. So there's definitely some sort of kind of
I have a traumatic experience in my life where I rented out an Airbnb and there had been a male cat there had sprayed and it was...
And this is how we come up with analogies in business, people. It's from trauma in our past lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Very good. And so how does the average person come across storage? Because I think there's an analogy here, maybe also with Brave browser, right? People learned a little bit about sharing data or democratizing or sharing access to some of their hardware, their browsing experience, and so on. And they can plug in, they can use a particular piece of software, and as a result, they get rewarded for that. How does it work with storage?
So storage is slightly different. We are more of a B2B. So we sit behind video sites, and we sit behind photo sites, and we sit behind people backing up, databases and financial data, or genomic data or physics data, right? So we're really good at large data sets that need to get to large people all around the world. And that could be a video, but for the most part, as a consumer, if we're doing our job right, you don't know that we're behind it because it's faster and cheaper, and it makes the service that you're using faster, cheaper, better, more secure, all the other good things.
Got it. And I suspected, as you said that, the play here is probably not to democratize a very small amount of data in a very large number of computers, because the logistics of that, the marketing of that, the just management of that is kind of unfathomably complicated.
Yes, our customers tend to be people who have big data sets, right?
Indeed. And then I guess so that's on the kind of demand side. On the supply side then, are you looking at kind of large providers of storage or large providers of capacity to help?
So we have a mix. For us, what we want a drive to be is competently run and always on. And ideally, it's a drive that's already been built, already been spun and powered and cooled, and so we're just using up the space that isn't currently being occupied. And so we have 22,000 node operators in over 100 countries. Some large, some small, but we also have, universities that have spare capacity or data centers that have spare capacity. Almost every drive in the world is again, only 30% full or less, right?
Got it.
And it takes exactly as much energy to spin that drive, whether the ones and zeros are in one direction or another, right? So
that's a good analogy, and something for people to remember that, right? The drive is spinning. It's what's on the drive that matters. So while it's already spinning, you're making sure that you're still using the capacity.
Yeah.
And I mean, how did you get to 100 different countries worth of providers? Is that something that you deliberately looked for capacity in different places? Was that a kind of just a factor of people engaging with the idea?
So I think it's a matter of people engaging with the idea. I mean, we certainly do some sort of posting in fora, right? If we suddenly see, oh wow, we've got a huge spike in demand from Brazil, let's try and get some more Brazilian nodes, right? Or Australia, right? But for the most part, the growth of the supply has been very organic, and it's a great deal for the people who are running the nodes, right? They've got spare space, and without doing much work at all, they can suddenly start having a passive income stream coming in, and that's great. And it's really great for businesses that have a lot of spare space. And then on the demand side, it's offering a great product that is for many use cases radically better than the alternative. And I know you want to talk about what it takes for decentralization to work, and the short answer is it's got to be better.
That's it.
It can't just be cooler because it's decentralized. It's got to be better because it's decentralized, 100%. And cheaper and faster and all those other things.
100%. And you've got two sides to the story as well, right? So on the demand side, right, the people who are hosting applications or want applications to consume data, they've got to believe that the proposition works, whether it's a decentralized application or not. Right. On the other side, the guys have got to believe that they're going to get enough of a reward for the amount of storage they provide. And so there's probably got to be enough of a large demand for them and enough of a reward for that passive income to be meaningful.
Absolutely right. So we sort of have always said here, if you use another analogy, I'll stop using Airbnb because you're tired of that. So I'll use, Uber. You need enough drivers and you need enough passengers. And if you have too many drivers, they're upset because there's, there's not enough passengers to go around. And if you have too many passengers and not enough drivers, then the passengers get upset because waiting a long time for an Uber, right? So we've sort of solved that problem. And we've also solved the problem that, if you're a driver, you don't want to get bad passengers. And if you're a passenger, you don't want to get bad drivers. In our case, it doesn't matter. Everybody sees the same thing. and part of the value of decentralization is that you don't have to trust, right? The rewards kind of take care of a lot of the trust issues. And
it's nice that this kind of the settlement and the management underneath at a protocol level just is managed, right? Once
managed, right? And people don't necessarily have to. From a security perspective, they don't have to trust us, right? Because we don't have the ability to mine their data. We don't have the ability to see their data, right? They don't have to trust the node operators because they don't have to, because they can't see the data or mine the data, right? All they have to trust is that, of the 80 or so that are holding on a piece of their data, fewer than 50 will fail in a certain time period, which again, we've sort of solved that. And then we just prove it because people have never lost data with us, and the people who run nodes make money, and the people who store data get better service, right? So.
That's indeed. And so this is to some extent a direct play to compete with cloud, or to augment cloud, or to supplement cloud.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that Amazon is quaking in their boots worried about us right now, and they shouldn't, right? I mean, and there are going to be use cases where they're always better, right? But we think that there's a huge set of use cases where this is just fundamentally better from an economic, from a environmental, from a performance, from a security standpoint, from a privacy standpoint.
Got it. And what are those sort of sweet spots at the moment? Where are you finding the success, or where are you finding those? I guess on the supply side, if the economics work, there'll be supply. But maybe on the demand side,
there's sort of limitless supply. If all drives in the world are less than 30% full, we can. Yeah, we don't need to build a stack of CD-ROMs to the orbit of Mars and back, right? But on demand side, what we're seeing is a range of use cases, almost all of which involve largish files. So there's the great, but not fun to talk about at a cocktail party, things like database backups and file backups, right? Because people want stuff to be stored securely. Then there is video, right? And we are finding that lots of people who are serving video really care about us. So for example, we have one of our earliest customers is a religious broadcaster of all things that has a huge library of sermons and things like that they deliver to people who are in prison. And as you can imagine, it's great because they have a captive audience, as they like to say. But the connectivity isn't great, right? Where they're shooting it to, they don't know what content is going to be popular at any one point in time. But we're able to enable them to deliver it fast, secure, and in a way that can also make sure that the people who are running the prisons don't have content coming in that they won't allow people to run. So that's a big use case. We also are working with a great a great company that is trying to offer a safe alternative for kids with their first cell phone, right? And so kids want to be able to share videos and photos and stuff like that, but you obviously want to keep bad people out, and you want to make sure that what gets stored in the right way. And so we enable that for them, right? And then we have AI, and AI is basically, from our perspective, it's large files, large language models that need to go to lots of different places around the world and be processed and learned from and develop new models, and we're great at that. So we're very busy with use cases that are there, and then I think over time, we're just replacing a lot of the more expensive infrastructure that's being used not only to store data but really to make it available, right, to distribute it.
Got it. And I suspect there's kind of we've talked about demand side and supply side, but there's actually kind of an intermediary side in the middle. And as a former employee of IBM, I've been sheep-dipped many a time in the joys and the benefits of IBM Cloud and how incredible it is. And this is not a sales pitch, I promise. But there are very many institutions out there who help organizations transform and who help those who are early on their journey to not on-prem data structures, or being able to have data, compute, storage elsewhere in a kind of cloud-based structure. Are you seeing some of the systems integrators or hyperscalers starting to look at you and think, I wonder if we offered that as our portfolio, what would be in it for us? Or are you starting to see some early movers in terms of helping?
Yes. So actually, we're getting our sort of go-to-market on demand is largely with partners. So we have systems integrators who are taking us in. We also have people who are, very few businesses want to buy storage per se. They want to buy a backup solution or a video editing solution or a video distribution system, right? And so we partner with the people who do video editing. We just had an announcement with Adobe. We partner with backups providers like Acronis. These may be names you know or don't know, right? But basically, end customers tend to want a complete solution. And we're infrastructure, and so we just need to make it really easy to integrate with us, consume us, and deliver great service on the back end.
Interesting. So there's also an enterprise SaaS component of this, where as infrastructure, you kind of plug into a video on demand for enterprise video editors or whoever it might be.
Whatever it be. Exactly. You've exactly got it right. So
there we go. Not the most immediately intuitive ecosystem map, right? For somebody who's never worked in this before, who doesn't work for an infrastructure business like a layer one blockchain, as I and some of those watching do. Actually, it's a little bit more complicated. So it feels like you've got a lot of stakeholder management going on. Are the conferences and the kind of the events and the AMAs quite busy?
They are right, and a lot of our growth, of course, happened during the pandemic when there was no such thing as an in-person conference, and but that's good. We're actually a distributed storage company in more ways than one. We're actually as a company, we have no headquarters. We have people in 16 countries, not in 100 countries, but you just get used to doing things asynchronously, if you will.
So you're living the decentralization kind of literally and metaphorically.
Absolutely.
In the business and with the people. And that's, promise this wasn't a deliberate segue, but thank you for it nonetheless. I want to talk a little bit about decentralized applications because we haven't used the word blockchain. We haven't used the word Web3 extensively. We haven't talked about this being a product for DApps or this being a product for the blockchain industry, if we can call it that. Very deliberately, because it appears that actually your product is decentralized. It's using decentralized technology, but it is not a business for blockchain. It's not a product for exclusively blockchain or blockchain apps.
Right. And I guess we've always sort of said, hey, there's the world of decentralization is a really big concept, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with decentralized storage. One of the tools in decentralization is, and out of many, is a blockchain, which is great for many things, but it tends to get slower as it gets bigger, and it tends to work in minutes, and our customers want things that happen in milliseconds, right? So we don't put that in front of our customers, right? And then even smaller than blockchain is crypto, which I hope to never use that word, just because I think it just
it's a loaded term. It's
it's
got
loaded.
it,
It's loaded.
it
It's a
means
loaded
something different
term.
to everybody.
Right. It means different things to different people, right? And so, for us, the use of blockchain is really just for some incentive mechanisms underneath. But most of what we do is just taking really good tool sets from around the sort of the whole tech sector, right, and applying them to this notion of decentralization, where we're better because we're decentralized, not just more private, because we're decentralized.
I think that's a really important way of framing it for people who are listening in and paying attention to this. That's a CEO of a decentralized business framing business value of their product rather than starting with we're different because blockchain. It's saying
most of our users don't care, right? So about 90% of our usage right now is, call it Web2 apps that are running on Web3 infrastructure. And then we do have we have great partnerships with people like LivePeer that are doing transcoding in a decentralized way. We have some decentralized apps that are running on us. We're actually a good way to get a blockchain around the world to lots of different nodes. But that's the amount of data that all the NFTs in the world could probably fit on one CD-ROM or a few CD-ROMs, right? So that's not a market that we're chasing after.
Again, some healthy perspective there, because I think when people look at decentralized storage providers, they sort of assume, oh, this is essential for propping up Web3, right? If we didn't have this, Web3 would be doomed. In reality, it's very, very different.
It's very, very different. But I absolutely believe, right, that I care about data, right? But I think people, we do want to be in a world where people own their own data, and we do want to be in a world where people, aren't mined, right? So even though a lot of the data that's on our network is stuff that isn't particularly sensitive, the case of the religious videos, right? They want as many people as possible to be seeing those, right? But nonetheless, if you've got your kids' photos on the other company I was talking about, right? You don't want anybody to see that. You don't want to be mined. You don't want that to be owned by anybody other than the end user.
Yeah.
And decentralization helps that.
So aligned philosophically with the way that kind of blockchains and Web3 are going in terms of self-sovereignty, distribution and decentralization of workload, of storage, the way in which apps are architected to ensure that they can't be taken down, that they remain as immutable as possible, or at least as up as possible. The non-Web3 term for that is just maximizing uptime.
Right, and that's most of our customers. That's what they care about. They care that we have good uptime. They care that we have good performance. They care that we're economical. They care that we have good privacy and good security. The how we deliver it is a sort of a very, very secondary thing for them.
Yep, and I think you're starting to see at least some of the more mature Web3 technologies start talking in terms of what we're enabling is automation through smart contracts. We're enabling decentralization of compute. We're enabling uptime of applications.
And that's what people care about, yeah.
And that's a mature way of talking about the value that you bring. You can talk also philosophically about whether an app is better to be decentralized or centralized. An enterprise is just going to say, no, we're an enterprise, right?
We're an enterprise. We have a problem to solve, right?
We work a certain way.
I know, by the way, if your customers are hospital, they care about keeping people alive. They don't care about decentralization of data. It'd be great if it's decentralized, but if they can't get that data to cure a patient, they don't care.
Exactly, and this is probably a kind of a useful segue into what does it take to grow more use of decentralized apps and decentralized tech? It's solve a problem. Actually provide a performance benefit to the users who can use you. In your case, you found some early hotspots in video, for example. Right. You found some early hotspots in AI, which is only going to increase the volume of data.
Right. And we found hotspots in boring but important things like backups. So that's
it's an easy story to tell, or you can present your value clearly, at least to an audience, in their own terms. When we talk about creating applications that have smart contracts underneath them, well, if you're building the application, your smart contracts need to run quite quickly. They don't need to be computationally expensive. They shouldn't be transactionally expensive. Yes, you pay for decentralization because you run a network of nodes, and there's a cost to that, in the same way that there is a cost to run compute in the cloud and there's a cost to run storage in the cloud. But if it's astronomically more expensive than having distributed cloud that's still performant, and you're probably not going to take down 3 cloud providers, or there's a pretty low risk, it's a difficult story to tell to somebody who doesn't appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Composability of blockchain technology, or the ability for open source technologies to be built upon,
Upon
and
it, right.
the way
Yeah.
that ecosystems can create innovation on top of networks, I think that becomes incredibly powerful, because if you're an enterprise and you've kind of hoarded all of your software in the middle and all of your database structures and everything else, no one's going anywhere near that. Most of your own staff don't want to go near that because it's a mess.
Absolutely, right. I mean, and so, I think I've learned after, a career that, spanned open source, including the most successful open source projects of the world, right? What you do to build a big ecosystem is you make it easy for people to work with you. You make clean interfaces, and you're able for people to extend the value in ways that you couldn't have possibly imagined, right? And part of what I think a lot of sort of decentralized projects get wrong is that they try and create a walled garden with a walled incentive structure and such a high barrier to entry. Like, you have to run a node and and have specialized equipment and all this other sort of stuff, right? That just inherently limits what people can do. If you want to, what is it? You want to go fast, you do it yourself. You want to go far, you do it as a team, and we want to go far.
Absolutely. And let's not forget kind of capital cost of playing as well, if you're going to host a node and have to stake at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, that just makes it not working. And in our case, right, our node operators don't have to run a node. I mean, our node operators are basically people who have got have a drive running, and they have spare capacity, right? So there's almost no additional cost, almost no additional startup, and they can get it back, right? And we love that. It's better for our network. But also, because we've structured it that way, consequences, we're actually much better for the environment, right? We're much greener, right? Because we're basically storing data on drives that have already been built, spun, run. Right? Everything that makes us economical also makes us green. And I think for green solutions to survive, just like decentralized solutions to survive, there has to be a powerful economic reason, as well as a good moral reason or ethical reason, right?
Very good. What else do you think kind of Web3 can learn from Docker? I think we were sort of starting to go down that road a little bit, but you mentioned composability.
And I should say, I've not been at Docker for a long time. I can't speak for the company. I'm obviously big fans. I love what they're doing. Right? But Docker very early on embraced open source, right, and embraced an open community, and said the community is much bigger than we are, right? So at its at least time I left, right, I think 90% of the code was written by people outside of the Docker organization. Almost all of the marketing and the learning was being done by people in meetups who had only a connection, right? Of course, lots of people were building on top it, around it, right? And I think that the lesson that we had was that, yes, you do things that way, you've got to deal with Discord, and you've got to deal with the as in like real Discord, not the platform Discord, right? You've got to deal with differences of opinion, and communities. All communities are noisy and have people with different incentives or priorities, and that's good, right? If you embrace that, then you can get really big and really useful really, really soon, and you just have to be willing to put your ego in check, if you will, right, and let the world guide you in the right direction.
Very good. And there's parallels there, right? I mean, I suspect a lot of what you've described there are the key success factors for an open source protocol.
Sure. And as you can imagine, we hear very, very frequently from people who are running nodes, and they have things that they care about, and customers have things that they care about, and people who work for the company have things that they care about, right? And people in places where electricity is expensive care about different things than people who live in areas where capital is. But it's interesting, right? But I think if you're going to be doing a decentralized project, you have to not only listen to the community, but empower them, right? And hope, if you do this right, 10 times as much money is made by the community as is made by you as the centralized entity. And that's good, right? Because you're making a really big pie rather than optimizing the angle of your slice.
And it's obviously inspiring to hear that, but I think so many business leaders in the world are not trained in that as a way of thinking. Right. The capitalism model, the accounting model, the strategic model of how most businesses are run is defeat others, capture as much of the market as you can, don't share, protect your IP, protect what's yours.
Right, and I get it, right, and yet, if I may, the biggest lesson of capitalism is, give up control and great things happen, right? The economy gets much bigger if you're not trying to, and if you're not trying, if you're saying, hey, align people's incentives with what you want as an outcome, and if the outcome is, if people want to improve their own lives, and in doing so, they make the economy bigger and they make or your ecosystem bigger, that's great. That's great.
So yeah, I think there's a shortage of ecosystem incentive economists out there. I think that there are an increasing number of token economists now, but I think it goes just
but they're looking at supply and demand of like tokens as a security as opposed to an ecosystem.
Exactly, it's a slightly more narrow or more specific art, right? You don't want to make sure that supply and demand outweighs itself and that an ecosystem can sustain, but actually the outcomes of what the ecosystem that is being incentivized by that token and how you arrange that. I mean, that's gigabrain stuff. And I don't know anyone who's successfully architected that from start and said, this is exactly how I planned it would be.
Yes, everybody recursively, justifies their life and their project and things like that.
There we go. I'd like to ask sort of for some guidance, if I may. So obviously you've had a stellar career. You've worked in some very impressive organizations and have spent a bit of time at Storj as well now. And so you've got to see software development, startup development from a whole bunch of different angles. Mm-hmm. For people listening into this show and looking at decentralized storage, considering Web3, considering maybe sort of building on storage or building with storage, or just building decentralized applications in general, what would be your guidance to them to help them get started or to learn from what you've seen in the last few years?
It's a really good question. So I think, maybe number one is be able to answer really quickly why decentralization is better than the existing alternative. And if the answer involves having to explain what a blockchain is, you're probably not going to succeed, right? And if the answer is, because some underlying token or crypto asset will go to the moon because of speculation, then that's also a bad thing to do, right? And then I think it gets very quickly to normal company and community building, which is, do you really, really care about this? Do you really, really believe in it? Are you willing to devote 5 to 10 years of your life to it? And will you be happy even if it fails? Because 7 out of 10 startups fail, right? And you will be going through a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of, and a lot of difficulty even for the ones that are successful, right? And so, I guess my maybe I'd summarize that as the end has got to be really good and make sense to you and to a lot of other people as well.
I like the way you put that. It's like it's going to be 3 or 4 years of hard work, and at the end of it, will you feel better for doing it? Right? If you're grinding every day, spending time away from your family, feeling miserable, yelling at your colleagues and friends, and generally kind of declining in your quality of life, because the outcome at the end of it will be worth everything, you've kind of missed out on the point of the journey.
Yeah. And by the way, I've like I say, I've been CEO of 4 startups, and during that time, I also had 3 kids, which I think I've successfully raised, right? But clearly, you have to choose where you put your time and effort, and be balanced. And then certainly, any startup is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and it's actually maybe not even a marathon is not the right thing. Maybe it's a marathon and a relay, right? So you're there with a team that's also running, and you only succeed if the team reaches the finish line. So.
There we go. In the most creative of all of the metaphors that we've used today, a very good one. Life and business is a marathon relay.
There we go. There we go. I like that.
Profound. I love it. I will use that. If with your permission, I will use that again.
You have my permission. It's all open source under a Creative Commons license. So there we go.
There we go. And for people who want to find out more about storage, what's coming up for you guys next? How can they find out more about what you're doing? What would you point people towards?
I mean, honestly, come to the website. We've got a great or come to the community. We've got, we sort of pride ourselves on transparency. So we've got a ton of information. If you're a customer, if you want to be a storage node operator, if you want to do both. There's lots of fun demos on the site. I didn't set it up here, but you can watch videos streamed directly from 1,000 different points around the world, and it's kind of a good way to sort of internalize what's happening here.
Love that. And that was one of the questions that we had in the comments from VJ, who had asked, are there any specific streaming use cases, or doesn't have to be real time, but are there examples of streaming of news events, oracles for smart contracts? And I think we talked about some of those, yeah. The first example with there being religious material that they want to beam out to prison locations, videos on your website that people can go check out. Yeah, and so video is a great use case because it's big files that need to get to lots of places, right? Then we also have, one of our best partners is actually the University of Edinburgh, which is part of a consortium with the University in Leicester and one in Cambridge, I believe. And one's working on physics, one's working on genomics, one's working on genomics, and they're all generating lots and lots of data that needs to go to lots of different, other research institutions around the world. And they're uploading, terabytes and soon petabytes of data, right? That needs to get streamed around the world, and that may not be as much fun to watch, but I don't know. I find it as inspiring as the cat videos. There you go. Yeah, the barrier to kind of enjoying it as much as the cat videos is probably a little bit higher, but regardless, another good use case.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yes, storage is a hard thing to demo, right? Because it's like, here are bits. There used to be ones and now there's zeros, and the zeros are now ones, and it's still there. That's a good thing, right?
Brilliant. Well, I've certainly learned a thing or two, and hopefully this has made the concept of decentralized storage, where it's useful, why it's useful, how to talk about it, how it's being used today, more accessible to most. So, Ben, I'm incredibly grateful you've joined us today. Thank you so much. Wishing you and the team all the very, very best, and stay safe out there.
Oh, thank you, and great questions. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Awesome. Have a great rest of your day.
Take care. Bye-bye.